Happy Pride, everybody. As Pride Month is winding down, I want to talk about something that doesn't get said enough in leadership conversations. Nothing about policies or rainbow flags and logos, and definitely not diversity statements. I want to talk about what it actually costs someone to walk into a room and not be able to fully be themselves. I'm Shar, and I've been in a lot of those rooms. And here's something about the LGBTQ plus experience that most people outside of it don't fully understand. Coming out isn't a single moment that happens. It happens over and over again. With every new job, every new team, every new room you walk into, you're reading that environment again from scratch. You listen for the comments, the jokes, and the offhand remarks that tell you whether this is a place where you can be yourself or whether you need to keep something hidden. And you make that decision every single time. Now, this is a similar experience that every outlier has in some way, shape, or form. Every woman who has walked into a job site and felt that room shift. Every person of color who has calculated how much they can show of themselves and that they can bring into a meeting. Every first generation professional who has quietly edited their background out of conversations because it just didn't seem to fit. That calculation is basically the same. It boils down to, is it safe to be who I am here? Now, some parts of who I am can't be hidden. My gender, my race. You see those the moment I walk in. But other parts can be hidden, and for a long time, especially early in my career on the shop floor, I hid them. Not because I was ashamed. It's because I had read the room, and the room had told me through 100 small signals that some parts of me were welcome while other parts weren't. That's masking, and it's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who's never ever had to do it. You're just not doing your job. You're doing your job while monitoring every conversation for signals, filtering what you say, editing who you are in real time. It's like running a second job on top of the actual job, but it's invisible, unpaid, and completely draining. Now, when I was coming up in the trades, the message was clear. Leave your personal life at the door, keep it professional, and if you couldn't take a joke, if the culture felt hostile or the comments felt pointed, you were told to grow a thick skin. Because if you couldn't take it, maybe this wasn't the job for you. Now, I want to push back on that directly. The grow a thick skin was never actually about toughness. It was about compliance. The environment is telling you that you needed to absorb whatever got thrown at you without complaint. Because the alternative was being labeled as difficult, sensitive, or someone who wasn't built for this work. It put that burden on the person being excluded instead of the environment that was doing the excluding. Now, there's an actual cost to that. And it's not just personal. Deloitte found that 54% of people who feel pressure to cover or mask their identity at work say it has negatively impacted their ability to do their job. 54%. That's not a personal problem. That's something else. And leaders who told people to grow a thick skin were actively creating it without even realizing it. Now, when I stepped into my first fleet management role, something shifted. I made the conscious decision to stop hiding. And that didn't mean making it a big announcement or going out of my way to make statements. I just stopped performing the edited version of myself. And that's when I realized how much energy I had been spending on the masking. Because when I stopped, I felt it lift. For years prior, I had no idea how much energy it took to hide. I got so used to carrying that weight, I didn't even realize it. It was kind of like a pair of real heavy work boots that you have to wear every single day. You don't realize how heavy they are until you take them off. When that weight was gone, I was able to focus that energy somewhere else, into the work, into the team, into showing up more fully than I ever had before. But it also made me see something I hadn't fully seen before. The people on my shop floor who were still doing what I had been doing, still running that second job, still monitoring, still keeping those walls up. I knew exactly what it was costing them, because I had paid that same bill for years. Now, here's what I need every leader in this conversation to hear. There used to be a clear line between personal and professional. You leave yourself at the door, pick it back up on your way out. That standard got sold to us as professionalism. But it was always flawed, because that price was different for everyone. If you're a straight white man in the trades, leaving yourself at the door have cost you practically nothing. Your whole self is already welcomed into that room. Professional was basically built around that image. Now, if you're anyone else, a woman, a person of color, LGBTQ+, working class, first generation, leaving yourself at the door means leaving behind the parts of you the environment had already decided didn't fit. Now, that's not professionalism. That's erasure with a nicer name. And we have the data now to prove that model failed. Gallup's 2026 State of the Global Workplace report found that only 20% of employees worldwide are engaged at work. Disengagement is costing the global economy nearly $10 trillion a year in lost productivity. $10 trillion. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when you build workplaces that ask people to leave the most important parts of themselves outside the door. Now, you might think your team is fine. You haven't said anything discriminatory. You treat everyone professionally. The person's race or gender is visible, and you've never made it an issue. But inclusion isn't the absence of obvious bias. It's the presence of genuine safety. And safety gets communicated in the smallest of things. The offhand comment you let slide, the joke you laughed at, the remark about someone's appearance or the relationship that felt harmless to you, but it landed like a warning to everyone in the room who's hiding something. Every one of those moments is a message, and the message is keep those walls up. Now, you don't have to say anything discriminatory to communicate that someone isn't safe being fully themselves around you. You just have to not stop it when it happens. I want to name something specific about the trades because it needs to be said directly. The trades have their own vocabulary for rejection. For women, the constant pressure to prove you're tough enough, one of the guys, not being a girl. Because the moment you're seen as anything else, you get pushed to the margins of the crew. And for men, it's being called weak, soft, or something worse. It's a way to police masculinity and make sure nobody steps outside a very definition of what they consider acceptable. These labels get used as weapons, and they don't just hurt the person they're aimed at. They send a signal to everyone who's watching. Somebody out there is still deciding whether it's safe to stop hiding, and that moment just answered the question for them. And so none of this works without trust. You can say all the right things about inclusion and safety, but if your team doesn't trust you, none of this will land. Trust isn't something you announce. It's something you build slowly, and it can get undone in just a single moment if you say one thing and do something else. Now, I personally don't always get this right, but I make every effort I can to get better at it. Now, here's what that looks like for me. When someone on my team makes a derogatory comment about women, about gay people, about race, I try to call it out, even when it's framed as a joke or no big deal. Not because I'm following a policy, because I'm usually one of those categories being singled out. And staying quiet in that moment would tell everyone in the room exactly the wrong thing. You don't have to make a speech. You don't need a training program. Sometimes it's just saying, hey, we don't do that here, and truly meaning it. That one moment can do more for our psychological safety than a year of diversity statements when it actually happens. And another thing I try to do is I try to get to know my crew. Not in a nosy way. I want to know how they're really doing, what matters to them, what they might be carrying outside of work. Even for the people who never share anything, it leaves the door open, because if they ever do have a hard time, they know there's somewhere safe to bring it. Now, I do that because I know what it felt like to be on a team where nobody asked, where the only version of you that was welcome was the professional one, where everything personal stayed behind that wall. When a leader makes an effort to actually know their people, it says something to your team that tells them that you're more than your function here. You're a whole person, and that person is welcome. That changes what people are willing to bring to work, and what people bring their attention, their creativity, their loyalty. That's the whole game. So here's what I want to leave you with. For the leaders, your team is not fine. Just because nobody has said anything. The people who are masking don't tell you they're masking. That's the whole point. Look at what you're tolerating. Look at what you're laughing at. Look at what your silence is signaling. The people hiding something are watching all of it. And they're using it to decide whether to keep those walls up. Stop telling people to grow a thick skin and start asking yourself why your environment requires one. Now, for the outliers still in stealth mode, you're not required to come out to anyone. That is always your choice and yours alone. But the energy you're spending on masking is real, and you deserve to be somewhere that doesn't ask you to spend that. Now, if you're a leader, build that trust and safe place. Because when people can finally stop running that second job, when they can put down that mask and just work, what comes out of them is extraordinary. I've seen it. I've lived it. And it starts with one leader deciding that real inclusion means everyone gets to bring their whole self through that door, not just the parts that are easy to see. Now, if you want to understand how you show up as a leader, whether you lead with technical competence that builds credibility or the human connection that builds safety, the Iron and Instinct self-assessment is free, and it's at the8secondlife.com. The link is in the description. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of Pride. I'm Shar. Stay in the middle.